In this video we wish to look at the generation of a cutting list using the method of generating panels. The first thing we'd want to do is get rid of all these dimensions. The model becomes very busy very quickly, and we can actually turn these off by going into Tools and Set to Display, Dimensions, and OK to that. So that's decluttered our drawing and makes it a whole lot easier to check what's going on when we get to that stage shortly. So the first thing we wish to do is select a metal profile. So it remembers the last selected profile, and I may not want this one, so if we go to change metal, and we have these filters to actually select by certain profile, and in this case I want to use something called a steel rib, and there's two profiles to select from, and I want the skinniest one, which is 400, and we hit OK, and now the 400 width steel rib profile is the one that we're using, and the allowance file that we're using is the default allowances. So we hit OK, and then we go to Estimate and GenPanels. Straight away all the panels are laid on the roof, and the drawing is annotated according to my default settings. In this particular instance, the default is to display simply the actual panel length, and to the nearest millimetre in this instance. We get a massive cut list, which is what you would reasonably expect, and I've also got rid of the absolute shortest possible sheet lengths by rounding those out using the minimum sheet length function under allowances. The amount of coil required to order is displayed, the area of the panels versus the area of the roof, and the waste factor is also calculated for us. Now this is a long list, and I wouldn't like to be the guy inputting that into my machine. You'll notice that in this instance the cutting list displays the rounded panel length, rounded to the nearest 10 mil, whereas the drawing has been told to display the actual panel length. That's one of the settings you set in allowances. Now, because that list is so big, one of the options you have, if you have the appropriate controller on your roll forming machine, is to select from a range of outputs, and in this case we wish to use the AMS Controls Eclipse output, and we hit OK. That writes the cutting list to the file, and that's ready to be sent to our controller. So the annotation of the drawing is determined by the allowances. Let's take, for example, I might decide I want to get the rounded panel length and the identifier, and we regenerate the cutting list, and I get a completely different appearance on our drawing. Zoom in here. It's now saying that this is roof plane number 8, panel number 9, and the length is rounded to the nearest 10 mil. Such a situation you might also cause issues with trying to read those things. If you go to Modify Panels, Move Text, we have a function here to move the text outside the roof so that you can make it a whole bunch easier to read for the guys in the field, and I'm sure they would appreciate if we do that. So we'll put that one about there. So the annotations applied automatically, but you're not stuck with what the software gives you. So that makes the whole thing a lot easier to read, and everyone should be satisfied with that. So there we go. So very quickly, the job's ready to be printed. The output is, as you see it there, will be printed on the panel cutting list report and the roof plan, and that's ready to go to the guys in the field. So that's generate panels. The key difference between this process and blocking, for example, is that there is no attempt to reuse the off-cut material in this instance. By the time the sheet is hemmed at the bottom and turned up at the top, the off-cut is generally a bit bent and broken, so it's not really practical to reuse. But in any case, with a narrow panel, the off-cut is not a huge percentage of the roof anyway. So this is typically the way roofs are done in North America and in parts of Europe, and quite a bit different for those of us down south. The one thing that you might be interested in doing that's not shown here is to line up these seams, and that's a regular thing that people would typically like to do, and we have the option here realigning the panels. So I could say take the panels on this roof plane and realign them with that point there, snapping to that point, and now all the panels on that hip end, the joins all align. So once we've done that, we then regenerate the panel cutting list by tally panels, and we're back to where we were, and all the seams align, which is what the guys wanted. So there we go. That's GenPanels. There's no allowance for offcuts, but the waste factor is fairly low because of the narrow girth of the panels. Well, that's about it for this videotape. Let's look at others shortly. Bye for now.